All right, Jim, we're on our next topic with a series of questions here sent to cornydrivethrough@gmail.com.
They're always a series of questions these days.
Well, a lot of people like to follow up on things we say on previous episodes, so I have a few that I've pulled up on this topic here. I'll ask them both back to back. This first one was sent to cornydrivethrough@gmail.com from Stuart in Glasgow, Scotland. Last week you were discussing Dusty Rhodes and mentioned what would have happened to Jim Crockett Promotions in the late 1980s had Dusty not gone to the WWF. I think he means WCW, and it says that here.
Right.
You said that Steamboat and Flair might not have happened because the former wouldn't have wanted to come work under Dusty. Can you elaborate on this? It sounds like there may have been a story there with the heat between the two. And then the other email, which talks a little bit about this, sent to cornydrivethrough@gmail.com from Dave, Colts Neck, New Jersey. Did Dusty Rhodes purposely poorly book Ricky the Dragon Steamboat so he could make himself the top babyface at Crockett? Ricky told the story a few years ago about the series of matches with Tully Blanchard, where he couldn't get the pin for the TV title within the legal time limit. Then Dusty wrestled Tully and did it on the first try. Doesn't look good. So, Jim, anything you want to say about the Dusty Rhodes-Ricky Steamboat relationship, which obviously goes back a few years?
Yeah, well, let me clarify also, back in those days, and it was brilliant that they did it this way because it gave them so many other things to do. The TV champion, especially when he was wrestling house show matches in the arenas, if it was a TV title match, because the TV championship matches on TV had a time limit of 20 minutes. So when the TV champion put his title on the line at the house shows, it was only on the line for the first 20 minutes. So you could beat the TV champion, but after 22 minutes, you didn't get the belt, which led to rematches and obviously, right? It was just another little thing, a loophole in the rules. And of course, Steamboat and Tully can go 20 minutes, no problem. So Dusty had him doing that. And then, but at the same time, you probably didn't want to see Dusty and Tully for 20 minutes. And also Dusty needed to win the TV title. I see both sides of it. Ricky Steamboat was one of the best wrestlers in the world and a legendary wrestling name in the Carolinas, the biggest NWA territory in the country. And the people loved him. But the reason why that Dusty Rhodes was hired as booker was not only because of his great ideas and the idea for Starrcade, but it's because, as we've talked about, Crockett's business was not setting the world on fire in 1983 after the big blow-off cage match with Steamboat and Youngblood, Slaughter and Kernodle. And they made Dusty the booker, and Dusty comes in 1980, pretty much the start of 84. Starrcade 83 was at Thanksgiving. And he starts bringing in his own talent and doing what all bookers do, giving other guys notice, bringing in his own guys. Business got worse before it got better, as it usually did when you had a new booker come in and change talent around and put his own people in. So Dusty, from his standpoint, was thinking, Jim Crockett has hired me away from Eddie Graham to book this thing, and I see the potential, and I see the big gates that we can draw in Greensboro, and I see all this other stuff, but I want to use my guys, my people, and me, because if his business was so good with the guys that were here before, why did he hire me to come in and change it? Meanwhile, Steamboat, from his side, is looking at, like everybody does, from his own perspective. Hey, it's not my fault if some of the business has been on its ass, because I just got out of the hottest tag team program they've ever run around here, and I'm still over. So something's going to give there, and generally it's the guy who's facing the booker. And that's what happened. Dusty was not going to use Ricky at the level that he'd been used in the Carolinas for the previous, that was 1984. Steamboat came in 76 or early 7. Been there for 8 years. how can we miss you if you don't go away? There's that. But it just, Steamboat at that time was, and he was never a guy that just lived check to check and had bad habits. So didn't he just take time off first and then evaluate and end up making a deal with Vince? He didn't just go from one place to the other immediately, did he?
He kind of did. Remember, early '84, he took off a little bit of time, and he was going to retire at one point.
Then he came back to Crockett, then he left and went straight.
And then he went straight to Vince. Okay. Now, to this point, and obviously your relationship with Dusty is different than everyone else's. Beyond anything, you guys were heels.
Yeah.
But it's not uncommon, or was it uncommon, in the actual locker room at the time to hear baby faces grumble about not being able to get past Dusty? Is there any truth to that?
Yes, there is. And some of them would grumble because, being honest, most of them could get past Dusty even if Dusty wasn't the booker. And that's the thing that, a lot of people also don't think. And I love Ricky Steamboat, and I'm a huge fan of what a fucking worker and what an athlete. And he was a godlike figure at one point in the Carolinas. But at that point, it was more important to the gate to have Dusty Rhodes on those cards than it was to have Ricky Steamboat. All things being equal, and whoever the booker was, because Steamboat had been there for 8 years, but Dusty Rhodes, one of the biggest babyface attractions in all of wrestling for the previous 10 years, had only been in the territory sparingly and for shots and never for a long period of time. So he was new and fresh and still one of the biggest stars in the business, whether he was the booker or not.
Would he have brought someone in who could have gotten over him? Because when you think about that period of time, obviously Magnum was a handpicked guy. And we don't know how things would have worked out, but Dusty, if there was anyone there that Dusty was going to do something for, it was going to be Magnum TA. It wasn't going to be Barry Windham at that point.
But it was Barry before, until Barry took off on him and went to New York, and he would come back a few times, but it was never the same after that. But Dusty always had I won't even say a secondary baby face, but always had a co-baby face, like a Barry Windham or a Magnum TA, the young, good-looking guy that the girls liked, because even Dusty realized he might have female fans, but he was not a heartthrob. Dusty was the hero. Even if Barry Windham or Magnum TA or the co-baby face was the best friend, they were going to get time in the spotlight because it was a different kind of baby face and different genre. But go ahead with your...
Well, just when you look at that period of time of any baby faces that would have possibly been available, obviously Sergeant Slaughter from 85 on was available, and they brought him in just for a couple of shots, even though he was such a big name in the Carolinas and never had a babyface run. They didn't really do anything. He ended up working kind of part-time for the AWA while making his G.I. Joe money. The UWF, even before the sale, but if we want to just refer to the sale, you had Jim Duggan, who immediately jumped to the WWF.
Yeah.
Ted DiBiase, who immediately jumped to the WWF. Steve Williams wasn't ready to be a top babyface. Would any of the guys in that class of top babyfaces actually have gone to... Would Dusty Rhodes have been a preventing factor from anyone going to Crockett Promotions?
On a personal basis, probably not. On a professional basis, if you're a big babyface in the business and you have an opportunity to go into a territory booked by Dusty Rhodes, you know that there's going to be a lot. The houses are going to be up. There's going to be revenue. There's going to be a lot of people on the card too. So maybe the payoffs might not be as up as far as the houses, but then you have the chore to decide whether you want to be in a high position, but secondary to Dusty. Just like if you were a heel going into Carolinas, you got to decide, do you want to be in a high position, but secondary to Flair and make more money than if you were in the main event in most other territories? And some people would say yes, and some would say no. But I'm saying, just like I don't know that there was a heel that could have been brought in to Crockett Promotions between 1983 and 1988 that could have gotten over Flair. I'm not talking about just once in a while or this guy's hot, boy, but I'm talking about on a consistent basis, everywhere, everybody. I don't know that there was a Ted DiBiase as a babyface couldn't have gone in the Carolinas and got over better than Dusty Rhodes. And I don't think Hacksaw Duggan could have either. And I'm trying to think who in the world of wrestling at that point in time, almost 40 years ago, people may have their revisionist memories and think, Dusty Rhodes was a fat guy wearing polka dots. I'm trying to think what babyface in the business could have come into Crockett Promotions in 1984 and gotten over Dusty Rhodes if they'd have been pushed over him.